Right. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to the Flint Community Webinar, your community resource every month. I am your moderator, Dr. Gurbaksh Ash. I am filling in for Dr. EJ, and we are so excited to have you join us for this lineup. So today we will be talking about back to school big feelings, a conversation on autism and adjustment. So all about kind of readjusting to routine from maybe a lack thereof over summer. We have a huge thank you to all of our participants and to our guests. So we have Dr. G, Nurse T, we have Dr. Crystal Sedurna, and Dr. Kat Burrell. So Dr. Crystal Sedurna and Kat Burrell are our peds psychologists joining us. We have, and then at the very end, we're going to try a new segment where we have two medical students from MSU, Elise and Suin, who are going to go over a couple pertinent research articles and talk about their implications. They're about screen time and development in children. So I think with that, we're going to kick it off. We're going to let Dr. Sedurna kick it off and get started with her presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon to everyone. I'm so glad you're here. What I'm going to be talking about and focusing on today is back to school with heart and how we support the emotional wellness of kids and parents. And I'm so excited to be here to talk about this one because I'm a pediatric psychologist of the Flint community for the last 15 years, working with kids and knowing what it takes to get back into school. But two, because I am a mom of two school-age kids myself, so I share this with you to see. These are some of the back to school, first day of school pictures of my kids over the years and just how fast it goes. So I will be speaking as an expert both from a clinical lens, but also from a lived experience lens today. And I'm super excited to impart and share any tips and tricks I can with you to make this adjustment easier. If you are comfortable and willing to, I'd love to see, and if you have the ability in the way you're joining us today, I'd love to hear and see in the comments if you're a parent or caregiver, if maybe you're a student who's returning to school and you're in here to get some tips and ideas, or maybe you're a community member who's just invested in your community and community members and families and wants to know how to support that. So I will try to take a peek at that as I can as we're going. Let me multitask and get my chat. There we go. So returning to school is a shift, right, from summer life and often is met with many mixed emotions. Kids getting a return to supervision in a safe space and structure in a safe space provided by someone other than you is always a relief and nice after a full summer. For them to begin to learn again, for you to get some quiet adult time potentially back again. Is all lovely, but then there's also the stress, right, of schedules and needing to get supplies and realizing shoes don't fit and clothes don't fit that did last spring, and getting them to and from all of their extracurriculars in school and all the things. And what we know is any change is stressful, but this is one that tends to be universally experienced by all parents. In addition to that, returning to school, when we're thinking about that, family emotional wellness plays a huge role in how ready kids are to engage in academics, to focus on what it is they're learning in class, to thrive in school. And we also know that parents and caregivers just play a really big part in kids' readiness for that. So what I'm going to do is go through strategies that would apply to kids of all ages, so kindergarten through high school. You know, I know we want to put our college kids in there too, because we never want to say folks are fully grown. So I suppose some of these could apply to college students also, if you want to venture that far. And even preschool. And then I'll get into some age specific things. And then I'll be around at the end to answer questions if there's anything specific I didn't answer. So in general, 4 big overarching strategies I want to go through for kids of any ages. Number 1 is to get back into routine. And I know this is like the cringe one, like, seriously, do we have to do this? We still have a couple weeks of summer. But if you want to have a smoother adjustment, yes, you do need to reinstate some routines. So some of the biggest places to do that is around sleep, around morning routines, and thinking through sleep quality as well as sleep quantity. So if you consider what time your child needs to be up in the morning on a school day, and then you think about the average sleep needs for them. So for school age kids, 6 to 13, it's somewhere between 9 and 11 hours a night, believe it or not. And for teenagers, it's somewhere between 8 to 10 hours a night, believe it or not. So let's say they need to be up at 6 a.m. for school. You want to go backwards based on the average sleep needs for a kiddo their age. And that's their target bedtime, which is probably significantly earlier than the time they've been going to bed this summer. You don't want to do it overnight, where all of a sudden you're like, okay, we have to change from 11 p.m. to 8 p.m. bedtime. But if you do about 30 minutes earlier every couple days and then wake them up about 30 minutes earlier every couple days in the morning, you will gradually shift back so you're more aligned with the timing of the school year. Morning routines, again, are important to start thinking about and getting reinstated. What do we do when we wake up? Do we make our bed? Do we get dressed? Do we eat something like within an hour of waking up? Just to support being ready to do that when school starts. Reintroducing learning activities for littles that can be like puzzles and board books and looking at colors and naming them. For older kids, maybe it's crossword puzzles or different types of just brain challenges, right? And there's so many different apps and ways we can do that. Creating a learning space. So thinking about in your home when your kids need to do schoolwork, where's that going to happen? And in an ideal world, that's a quiet, distraction-free place that has all the supplies. So there's no excuses. They can't be like, I need a pencil or I need a ruler. It's all there. But it doesn't have to be a dedicated space. It can be the kitchen table if it needs to be. It can be other spaces like that, but kind of thinking about where that space is going to be and what you want to have in it so you're prepared. And then thinking about getting out that calendar and starting to put all of like the school days off and the school start days and the important things on it and kind of starting to communicate about that as a family. So I really deep dove into the routines one because I think it's one of the most important things you can do to prepare your family, yourself and your kids for school. But other things we want to be thinking about in preparation for, and even once school starts, is reassuring kids that whatever they're feeling is completely okay. It is okay to be nervous, excited, scared, irritable about certain aspects of school, and you can feel all those things at the same time for different reasons about school. So helping kids understand what you're feeling is normal and all right, and I'm here for it all, and we're going to get through it all together. The two other, no matter what age strategies I want to talk about is checking in regularly. And this can start now, and then this should ideally continue throughout the school year. And this is just giving spaces. I like to say what's strong and what's wrong, but what's going well, what's easy for you. Where are you seeing that your talents shine and where your strengths shine? And then what's tough and what's hard and where do you feel like maybe you're getting behind or feeling really stressed out? What are you liking and enjoying? What's challenging and easy? And sometimes when we ask those questions really generally, we might just get like a, I don't know, or like everything's fine, or like not a whole lot of response. Or for littles, they may think about something very specific and respond to that. So you may want to be prepared with some little bit more specific kind of prompts or direction for those questions. So asking about things like their academics and learning across different subjects, asking about their relationships with teachers, with peers, if they're, in high school and sports, with their coaches or with their mentors, thinking about how they're doing in different spaces that are important to their life. So what's happening on the playground? What's happening in the hallways? What's happening on the bus? So these are like really common unstructured spaces where social issues are more likely to happen because adults aren't quite as present, aren't structuring the time. There's just a lot more room for things to happen. So thinking through, making sure we're asking and checking in periodically on those different spaces. And then lastly, modeling calmness and flexibility. Now, I'm Italian and I'm like a big gesture and I get all kinds of the feels about everything. But when I'm talking with my kids and listening, I work really hard to think about the energy that I'm bringing, to pause and to think about what they need from me in those times that they are sharing. So if you've got littles or school age kids, they will probably disclose pretty readily to you what's going on. But once you get into like tween and teen age, they're not going to tell you a whole lot unless they feel really safe and like they're not going to be judged or they're not going to get in trouble for talking about things. So to the extent that you can remember your role in those moments is to listen and affirm and validate, and support them in coming to their own natural conclusions about what to do, you will find that your kids will be so much more open with you about what's going on, and supportive. And my favorite pro tip for this is to breathe in when you have the urge to like get in mama bear or papa bear mode about something, because you physically cannot breathe in and speak at the same time. So it gives you like just enough time to be like, okay, we're not going to judge. We're not going to scream. We're not going to yell. We're not going to like ask 45 more questions. We're just going to meet them where they're at. Okay, so then I'm going to a little bit more quickly go through some age-specific guidelines, but I am happy again in the Q&A to deep dive into any of these. With preschoolers, starting to practice short separations is a really, really good idea, because those first separations, when you drop them off and leave, are going to be very, very tough for them. You know you're returning. You know you'll be there. They don't, and you're their person, and they want you there, and you've just spent a whole summer being their person. And so to the extent you can start building at whatever natural amount of time away they can tolerate, and then gradually increasing that so that they see you leave matter-of-factly. You know, you have your goodbye routine, you leave, and you always return, and then you have your return routine that will help them prepare for the separation for preschool. Using pretend play to preview what school's like, right? So role playing or with dolls, or you know, even just talking through, or fantasy play or things like that. What happens and what some of the things are that will happen in their routine from home to school or during the school day and back home. And then really working with kids to learn how and begin to be able to recognize their emotions at any given moment and name them. Helping, this is a life skill. It's as important as tying our shoe or anything else, but we aren't born with it. So we need to teach kids how to be able to name their emotions. That's the first step towards teaching them then what to do with them. And that's the first step in us adults knowing what they're feeling so we can better respond and more accurately respond to what they need. In the elementary school age, the three big things that I want to encourage is, again, validating those big feelings. So everybody wants their feelings and experiences to be legitimized and validated. And validation is really just about recognizing someone's perspective and appreciating where it comes from. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree that not getting to sit with, you know, Janae on the bus is a life-ending thing. But if it's that big to your child, you can appreciate and recognize and empathize with that, right? So given you wanted to sit by Janae on the bus and you didn't get to, and it was the first day of school, it's understandable you're so sad and upset. What do we want to do about it, right? So just validating it. Creating rituals is huge too. So do you have a goodbye song, or do you have like a, you know, some kind of handshake that you do before they get on the bus or walk out of your car? It could be notes in their lunches if you pack their lunches. It could be, you know, some type of post-it note that's on the counter when they return home from school, if they're old enough to be coming home and you're not there. Maybe they have big siblings in the home. But what kind of rituals can you set up that create just, again, a routine, something to look forward to, something that maintains that connection? Building independence is another big one. So when we are busy parents and we're spread thin, sometimes it's easier to just make the lunch, to take care of the dishes, to dress them, to get the clothes out. The challenge with that in the long run is they're not gaining the skills to be able to do that on their own. So the return on investment of putting in the extra effort and things taking a little bit longer or being done a little bit more messily is that they ultimately learn how to do it on their own, which one is very, very important for their self-esteem and confidence. But two, ultimately, we want to raise kids that can launch into the world and take care of themselves. So checks a lot of boxes. So this could be things like picking out their outfit the night before, making their bed, helping with breakfast or making breakfast or lunches, putting their dishes to the sink or in a dishwasher or washing them, packing their bag. And again, the level of support can vary based on the child's age, based on their abilities and what they can do. But you always want to be challenging them to just get a little bit more independent than where they already are. Moving into middle school, we want to be thinking about increasing needs for personal space and privacy. So this is when, if kids have the luxury of their own bedroom, that's like where they want to be. They're going to be in there with the door closed and just want to be on their own. And it is important in middle school to respect this newly emerging need for privacy and emotional space, while also balancing that with remaining connected and accessible and available to them. So what I would recommend is having phone-free times, right? That could be dinner time, that could be between the hours of 3 and 5, whatever you choose for your house, but times where literally the phones are inaccessible. And ideally, that's everyone in the house, not just the child. But at minimum, it ought to be your middle schoolers or younger if they have phones. Thinking about times you can connect with your kids. If you just like go into their bedroom and you're like, hey, what's going on? And you're like staring them right at them, they're probably going to be like, oh, I need space. Get out of my private space, please. But in a car where you're side by side or, on a bus side by side, when you are going to take them for a Starbucks run or a Big B's run or whatever their coffee du jour is, because yes, middle schoolers are doing this these days. Anytime you can take them out to do something they enjoy and it's a shorter period and you're not staring straight at each other is a great opportunity to connect and just check in and see how things are going. Periodically remind your middle schoolers that you are there and non-judgmentally for all of it. You're their person and yet you want to give them space. So if it ever feels like you're ignoring their emotional needs, you're not trying to, you're just trying to respect their space and need for privacy. And that way you're kind of balancing both with them. Reminding them also paired with that, though, that there are some things you will always want and need to know, and those are safety things, right? So if we know that child's going to hurt themselves or someone else or is at risk of something happening to their physical or majorly to their emotional health, those are things we have to know. And those are things that we will respond to in the most appropriate way we can to make sure that safety is the priority at that point. Two other big things for middle schoolers. Peer struggles are huge in this age group. Emotions, hormonally driven emotions, are starting to come up at a level of intensity they've never felt before. There are all kinds of changes in peer groups and transitions happening. The social skills aren't there to navigate the nuances of all the conflicts that come up. So it's really important that kids understand that that peer struggles are just normal and to be expected. And what matters most is how we deal with them when they happen. And then we talked a little bit about social media limits. I just wanted to point out to you, Common Sense Media is a really nice organization that will vet all kinds of apps, TV shows, movies, and books and tell you like from their professional expert opinion at what ages they're probably appropriate and why. What are the good things about a thing? What are the challenging and risk things you should know about it? They also have this beautiful family media agreement, which will help you think through what are the important aspects of social media use I should be talking about with my tween or teen before I give them this device and access to social media. If we're talking about high schoolers, the big thing to appreciate is to talk about stress. What challenges are they facing and what's tough to navigate and overcome? As far as relationships, this is with friends, partners, coaches, family, siblings, even with you. As far as their identity, giving them safe and affirming spaces to have conversations about their sense of self. So just open and honest places. And recognizing there can be a lot of questioning or experimenting or just not being sure in the teenage years, and being there for all of it and being affirming for all of it will support them and ultimately landing on their feet with a more solid identity when they get to young adulthood and that happens. Encouraging planning and self-advocacy. So this is also a really big skill that we want to think about in this age. High schoolers need to plan for academics. They need to think about personal development, extracurricular activities, future goals. We also want them to be thinking, what do they need to succeed? What resources are they missing? Who and how might they get those? And how do they develop the confidence and the skill set to be able to advocate for themselves to get those things? So very, very important skills to work towards. And then lastly, keeping that communication open and non-judgmental. I'm watching the time and Dr. Burrell has such important information to share. So I want to just make sure that before I wrap up, I remind you that we started with the kids, but what really matters most in the wellness of our kids is, as parents, our personal wellness. There are so many studies showing that we are in a parental mental health crisis right now. And in fact, the US Surgeon General had released a huge report talking about just how critical it is across the country that we start putting and investing way more resources into our parents and what's going on. Because being a parent alone significantly increases the amount of stress that we experience. Some good tips that you can do: stay connected and connect with other people going through similar experiences. Offer to help others, but allow yourself to receive help. It's hard, it's humbling, but it's okay. And life is easier when we support each other and do it together. Um, to the extent you can, engaging in good self-care activities is good. Knowing the signs and symptoms of mental health difficulty. So if you're having feelings of sadness or irritability and they're lasting like 2 or more weeks straight, to the point where it's hard to get out of bed, or you're feeling really, really tired or guilty or hopeless, and it's starting to impact your ability to parent or your ability to get to work, or it's affecting life, those are good signs and symptoms that seeking out some support would be helpful. And I share 988 here. This is something you can put in your phone. This is something you can look up on the internet. It's a 24/7, they call it a crisis or behavioral health line, where you can get support, again, 2 a.m., 6 a.m., 10 p.m., for any mental health issues you or someone you love may be going through. And then I put Genesee Health System in here as well as our local community mental health agency that has all kinds of different services for a variety of different behavioral health needs. So just to summarize, back to school with heart means starting with your connection to your kids. It means supporting routines and regulation for them. And it means being emotionally present, but not needing to be perfect. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sederna. That was really very helpful. And I, as a parent myself as well, I appreciate that you put in, thinking about ourselves, because I think we so rarely do. That's always the last thing on our mind. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Burrell now, who's going to shift the conversation just a little, and I think more specifically talk about kids with autism.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just trying to figure out how to share just the slideshow part. There we go. Oh, all right. Let me go back all the way. There we go. So thank you for all that information, Dr. Sederna. It was an incredible breakdown of how our kiddos throughout their developmental period can really adjust in different ways to something as big as going back to school. And so what my role here really was trying to focus on a more specific subset of kiddos, and that being kids that are on the spectrum. This is something that's, been very much a passion of mine for the last 13 years, 12, 13 years, and I've had involvement with autism for way longer than that. But I've just found that it's just something that is needs the attention and requires us to just be more sensitive and attentive to more specific things like going back to school. And so that's really kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, is really just highlighting some pearls of during that transition period when you are going back to school, things to think about, as well as once you are back in school, and then even considering things like going from school to Christmas break and other different breaks. What are some behavioral interventions and things that parents can consider in those situations? And if you know me, I will always put up a quote from Temple Grandin in any of my autism talks, because I think she is just so incredibly inspirational. This is an individual, a human with autism, doctorate degree, who has been an incredible advocate for the community of autism. And so I always find something in her quotes to apply to what we're doing. And so for here, I thought this quote was applicable. The most interesting people you'll find are the ones that don't fit into your average cardboard box. They'll make what they need. They'll make their own boxes. And I think that's so applicable to talking about what things might be helpful for these kiddos and teens, because we don't know what works for one and what will work for another, and that's always been the quote, is that, one kid on the spectrum, one kid on the spectrum, because they are so beautifully unique in their own way from one to the next. In my 13 years, I've never done an evaluation of autism, and thought to myself, oh, this kiddo is just like this kiddo, because it just doesn't happen. And so I think going through a lot of these different things that we'll talk about today about ways to help in that transition is, one may not work for one may not work for another, but hopefully at some point some things work through trial and error to make that transition easier. All right, and so just a real brief review about autism. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but the specific criteria really have to do with challenges in communication and social interactions, as well as restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, language, and interests. And so understanding that and understanding these really two different criteria and different features, there's a lot to consider under each. So when we're thinking about socialization and communication, we're also looking at challenges when it comes to this ability to have social emotional reciprocity in conversations and in dialogue and in interactions generally. And that also includes nonverbal communication. It also includes the subtle ways of interacting with people that just aren't verbal. And then difficulties with challenges in developing, maintaining, and understanding different relationships. And so going back to school, going to an environment where it is just nothing but other students and social opportunity, certainly some of those challenges can impact that transition. And then when we talk about the behavioral aspects of autism, this is where a lot of these transition challenges can stem from. So we're talking about repetitive motor movements and speech and repetitive interest in objects or repetitive use of objects. We'll talk about inflexibility to routines, ritualized patterns of behavior, highly restricted fixated interests, and then sensory challenges that can play a role in that transition as well. Just very quickly, just from the most recent research, just in 2025, it came out through the CDC that now the rate of autism is 1 in 31 of 8-year-olds. And so that number keeps climbing. And so we need to keep talking about it, and we need to keep highlighting that kiddos on the spectrum or even neurodivergent children or individuals, we need to keep talking. We need to having conversations on how to make things the best for them in their environment that we can. We're slowly increasing the average age of first diagnosis, which now is at 47 months of age. And there's also some racial considerations that at this point and in 2020, it actually flipped where it used to be more common in Caucasian population, whereas now the higher prevalence of autism is more within the Asian Pacific Islander, Hispanic, and Black population. So something to keep monitoring over the course of time, and that the population is more likely to also have a co-occurring intellectual disability in that particular race. And then for male females, we're looking to that gap is getting smaller over time as well. So it used to be for every 1 girl, it was 4 boys were identified. Now we're at 3.4, and so just some noteworthy changes in that new study. All right, so now I'm going to shift gears and really kind of dive into more of our transition into the school. And so for some children, like Dr. Soderno was talking about, for some children and families, back to school is a super exciting time, and the kids are getting ready, they're picking out their clothes, they want to go school shopping, and it's so fun to see. But for others, it's an indicator of, gosh, this is going to be a really, really challenging time for me and my family. And so we know that, for the research out there shows that along with other children with disabilities, with kids with autism and other kids with disabilities, they have higher rates of anxiety, social isolation, and difficulties with academic performances in that transition period. Children who are first starting school, studies show that they're less school ready emotionally. So these are the younger kiddos starting in that educational system. And they're less emotionally ready than their peers, and those children with autism appear to have more externalizing types of behaviors, self-regulation difficulties that ultimately affect their school engagement and their relationships with their teachers. So knowing that, we want to make sure that we're tapping into some of these different considerations. And so these things, these considerations certainly, like I said, not all kids with autism will struggle with those transitions, but there are some significant considerations that you have to have when thinking about autism. And so the level of impairment of that child, the level of impairment in the symptoms that they have of autism certainly can make a difference in their adjustment to back to school, as well as if they have any comorbidity. So if they also have an intellectual disability, in addition to that autism, that certainly is something that might make that more challenging for that child. Prior experience and age. So prior experience meaning they've had 5, 6 years under their belt of school. It may be less challenging for them. If they're older, it may also be less challenging for them. So certainly that's something to consider. Level of the transition. So within school, going between grade 2 to grade 3, where you are trying to you're going and you're around the same peers and you're around the same familiar teachers and environment versus going from elementary school 5th grade to, let's say, 6th grade, where you're changing schools completely. And you're going from a very structured type of, you have your homeroom teacher, this is what you do, and then all of a sudden you transition to middle school, and now you have to change 6 different classes, and you are in a much bigger setting with more people, because middle schools tend to be more condensed, and so that can certainly play a role in that transition. And then the level of supports that are in place, if any. So we have families that have a tremendous amount of supports in their life, all the way to families that really don't. And so that is going to make a difference in how that child transitions from one place, or from not being in school to being in school, in terms of adapting. All right, so before we start school, there's certainly some things that I think are important to highlight. Um, Symptoms of autism certainly interfere with successful transition back to school, like overstimulation, right? You go back into an environment where it was calm, it was your protected space, it was your safe space. You had everything you need to make you feel calm and safe, to a place that's completely different. Certainly anxieties related to those transitions, rigidities, peer interaction, those are going to play a role. And so some aspects of what we can do to help some of these kiddos can be really starting off at a very, very early time in the summertime to talk about it. Talk about it early, talk about it often. And it doesn't have to be elaborate kinds of conversations. It can be very brief, short. Oh, it's looking like we have, 30 days till you start school. And see what they give you. And for kiddos that are nonverbal, it could be as simple as, pointing things out in a book that, oh, school, you're going there soon, trying to use visuals to help them transition, and get to the idea that, yes, eventually school is going to be starting back up. A big one that I would say is very, very, very crucial for a lot of these kids is creating and using a calendar to mark really important dates that are coming up. And so these can be the smallest little things, like I'm going to put down on this calendar that we're going to go look at school supplies and together, and you can tell me what it is that you like and things that interest you, all the way to we're gonna go and drive around the school to see what the school looks like, and maybe take a walk around the school and go see where your wing might be of the school. So little things all the way up to bigger things, like a meet and greet with teachers, meet and greet with peers prior to school starting, as well as first day of school. And is that a half day versus is that a full day? And are other kids having half days? And why are they having half days versus the other parts of the school maybe having full days? So just little things in there can be really helpful. And that's really all that calendar should be used for, because that's what it's identified to do, is really just be that guide for that kiddo to say, this is your school calendar. This is what we're going to go to anytime there's things that we need to do related to school. Requesting supplies lists really early can be fun and helpful for parents, because before the school rush because when you get to the school rush and the shopping, it can be really overwhelming. There's a ton of things aren't where they need to be. so the experience of going out and getting the supplies is really helpful. It's a socialization opportunity. It's teaching adaptive skills to these kids, but being more selective of how you go about getting that. So if they struggle with being overwhelmed in really large places, maybe you start first thing when they first open, and that's the time that you go. But having them be a part of that and getting excited and getting to pick things out on their own can really help with that adaptability. As Dr. Saturno was talking, bedtime, wake time routines are really challenging, and getting back into those for our neurotypical kids is challenging too. But when you think about kids on the spectrum who already have a hard time with transitions, you want to be extra cautious and you want to start extra early. And so at least 2 weeks prior to school starting, trying to slowly get them back into that routine, and not just going to bed, but also waking up, because it's hard to wake up when you've been sleeping in and not having times where you have to be scheduled to do something in the mornings. And so something to certainly consider. All right. And meet and greets are a really common thing, really important as far as kiddos getting a chance to meet who their teachers are. But it's not even just teachers. It's meeting who the bus driver is. It's meeting who the aides might be in that classroom, who the PE teacher might be, and who their resource room teacher might be. And so if you can do that, not just once, but multiple times, that can be helpful. But even we've had kids that I've recommended that they're in middle school, and they get the teacher's email, and they email the teacher beforehand to just say hi and say, I'm looking forward to meeting you, as a way to start and spark a communication that isn't necessarily face to face, which can be intimidating for these kiddos and can be nerve-wracking. And so maybe starting smaller with those kinds of communications can be helpful too. Practice the drive. So we know that the drives to school can be a challenge for a lot of our families. The bus rides to school can be a challenge, and so the more information that you can give your child about what's going on, and what the route is, and how long you're going to be on the bus, those kinds of things can be really helpful. So just getting in the car and trying to practice driving to the school and practice parking, those little things can make a difference. Doing a tour on the school on multiple occasions if possible. So again, you can always, parents can talk with the principals and say, hey, I know teachers are on site. Is it okay if I bring, Adam by, and we can just go make another round of the school today, just to get him comfortable with where his classes are and get him comfortable with where things are going to be and where his locker is. And so that communication can be really helpful too. Creating an about me. So this is actually one of my favorites, where parents, it's a kind of a little bit of a letter, about me letter, that can go to all of that child's teachers, that really, it can be from the parent perspective, but the ones that can be really helpful are the ones more from a child perspective, that tells them all about them, that tells them, I'm really nervous, this is who I am, these are the things I love, and the things that really are difficult for me, that make my life a little bit more challenging. And so when I get really upset, these are the things that can be really helpful for me. One of my more challenging things, and having kind of, you're almost giving solutions to a teacher who doesn't quite yet know that student, but you're giving them almost a handbook of, this is my kid, and this is how to understand him or her, and this is how you can help them when they are in the classroom. And knowing those things can be really helpful. So imagine a teacher who, or a teacher who doesn't have any exposure with, assistive communication devices, for example, or programs. And so having the knowledge that that's something that would be useful for that child, and that's their primary way of communication, they would want to know that information. So it's just a really nice way to wrap things. You can have pictures on there. You can have pictures of their favorite stuffies, and just different things that give your child just a really beautiful look of this is who they are, but packaged in a little letter. I've had a lot of teachers and I've had a lot of parents just really say a lot about how this has impacted their communication with their teachers and their relationship with the school. All right, so creating visuals can be incredibly helpful for these kiddos as well. So a schedule of, we're prepping the schedule for what the school schedule looks like, checklists. So maybe in the mornings, it's a checklist of what they need to do to get ready before they come downstairs or get on the bus, or maybe it's a checklist that when they get home from school, they'll have certain tasks, but creating those visuals for these kiddos really helps to organize them, make things predictable for them, as well as helping them kind of feel more independent in what they're doing because they have a way to check things off and go, okay, I did this one, I can go to the next one. So visuals are really wonderful for those things. Discussing with the teacher the level of knowledge and comfort with these different devices that I had talked about a little earlier. So if a teacher isn't familiar with the different iPad systems that are used for communication, like PEX systems, then making sure that there's enough time before school starts that you can have a discussion with that teacher and make sure that they're aware of everything and all the small things, technical things that need to be in place before a kiddo comes in. Social stories are wonderful ways to prepare our kiddos to get into the school and to start back into the education system. And I put a link right there of some really good free social stories that parents can print out and cut out and put together into little books. And that can help with that transition. Identifying sensory safe spaces in the classroom can really help reduce stress and sensory overload. So every classroom is made differently. Every teacher creates their classroom in different ways. And so being able to look at the classroom before the kiddo starts and seeing if there's any specific places, knowing what that classroom looks like. Is there any kind of things that you can talk with the teacher about to say, hey, could this be Adam's little safe space? And if so, is there anything we can do to kind of make it more comfortable for him? So sometimes it can just be a blanket. Sometimes it can just be a beanbag chair, or sometimes it can just be an area that has no windows, that's more in a corner, that can be dark, that can provide a little bit more of that sensory relief. And so sometimes parents will also see if the teacher's willing to do earphones and things like that that can be helpful. And so those discussions up front are really important before the kiddo starts into the classroom. Ensure that the teacher has a behavior plan. So some kiddos that come into school have never had behavioral concerns, and so it's not on the radar. But sometimes they just happen because it's a big transition and things change. Or other kiddos come in and they have some challenges behaviorally prior to school starting. And so sometimes teachers are aware of what those look like and what those are. But it's always important to, no matter what, have some sort of plan in place and make sure that any sort of behavioral concerns are discussed before they actually start. Even talking about behavioral things that were helpful for that child in the previous years, making sure that that teacher's aware of what worked and what might not have worked at that point. And this isn't just behavior problems. We're also talking about elopement. So there's a large portion of our kiddos who they just take off, and it's not because they want to run or they want to escape. Sometimes it's something that we just don't know what they're running toward, and sometimes it's just they have a burst of energy and they just want to go. So putting those safeguards in place before the kiddo starts school might be a good conversation to have with a teacher. Back to kind of our calming space that I was talking about in the classroom, you can spend some time before school creating kind of sensory kits together. So understanding what your child is really responds well to, whether it's fidgets or squishies or their stuffies, if it's earplugs or, things that are little problem-solving puzzles that are small. There's different things that can go in those sensory kits based off of the needs of every child because every child's different. And creating those together before school starts would be a really great way to help them prepare to transition in. And talking to the child about those things like, hey, when you're in the classroom, this is something you could use this for if you find that you're really upset. and having the dialogue. And if you just Google sensory kits just on Google, there's a ton of different examples out there. There's some super cheap ones, ways that you can make things and create things on your own at home. And then there's all these massive elaborate ones. But the reason why there's so many is because there's just our needs of our kids are so different. And so we just want to make sure we include everybody. Set up a few meet and greets prior to school too, if they have classroom friends that they haven't seen from the year prior. So maybe it's a parent that you were aware that was in their classroom the year before. It may actually be helpful to get them together for just a little bit of a meet and greet, whether it's at the favorite McDonald's or wherever it is, just so they can get used to seeing and being around the same faces again that they were before. Taking pictures of the school to help provide those visuals for the kiddo can be helpful. Taking pictures of the teachers and their faces, and you can label them. Those are things, putting them in a binder so that they're familiar with who they're going to go see when they are in the classroom, can be a really great way of preparing these kiddos in that transition period. And then check in with them early and often. How are they doing? So even kids that are nonverbal, it's still important to still check in, say, hey, buddy, how are you? Even if you may not get a response or you're just hugging them, something to say, I'm listening to you, I'm here for you. And then face visuals may be really helpful for them at home for you to use when you're having those discussions to really highlight, are you excited about going to school? Are you anxious or worried? And you putting those words to those faces really will help them better be able to learn some of those emotion vocabularies. All right, so we talked about a lot of things that can be implemented prior to the school. And so there's a lot of things after school that can be considered too, to just help maintain a positive transition or to help address any behavioral concerns or factors that happened as a result of maybe some challenging transitions. And so first and foremost, as a parent, expect the unexpected in the first few weeks. There is no drawn out map for how things are going to go. The best thing that you can do as a parent is implement the things that you feel will be helpful for your child. Cross your fingers and continue the work once they start school to adjust and adapt. And there's no right or wrong answer to any of these things. A lot of it is trial and error. And so some of these things might be really helpful, like visual schedules throughout the school day to go from place to place can be easily accessible. A lot of the times you can put them on these little binder rings and they just carry it and they hook onto their backpacks. Pretty easy to just create those, and then those can change out depending on what those schedules look like as well. But in the first few months, expect those unexpected. Set really clear behavioral expectations for school behaviors too. And so you can always have those dialogues at home at the end of the school day and say, if there were some behavioral challenges, you can talk about those and say, you had a hard day and that's okay. Trying to highlight, remember we keep our nice hands, we keep our hands to ourselves, and in highlighting a lot of the main aspects of whatever behaviors are happening at school and talking about them. And then staying on top of your child's progress throughout the school. So I really like on Autism Speaks, there's some tips for parent and teacher communication. Parent and teacher communication is really, really helpful because going in and saying, this is what my kid needs, which is great, you're advocating. However, school systems have their own ways of doing things and teachers have their own ways of doing things. And the biggest piece to this is how can everybody come together and communicate effectively to address the same goal that you all have, which is how to make this one child be as successful as they can be. And so some really great communication pearls are on this website, but being open-minded, having frequent communications, highlighting the things that, you've seen the teacher do that are really helpful can really help that teacher recognize, wow, she's noticing that and that's being helpful for our kiddos. So those communications are really, really helpful. And there's a lot of tools out there that schools use and apps for communication as well. Every school has a different one, but if that's something that your school uses, definitely learn to use it and use it in a way that's really effective with your teachers. Volunteer if possible. You know, we're all busy, and so if that's not a doable thing, it's not a doable thing. But if it is, that might show it might show that you have that added interest. Your kiddo sees you being there, and it can be exciting for them, and may help reduce some of those anxieties, and may help parent really see like, okay, this is kind of how the classroom's set up, and this is some of the challenges that are going on. That then you're kind of the detective and seeing how you can implement some changes in your child to make things better for them based on what's going on in the classroom. Break or calming spaces, so discussing those throughout the school year if those are helpful or not helpful for that child. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of speed through this, but maintaining a calendar like we had talked about, school events, breaks that are happening, appointments that that child has, and reviewing that at the very beginning of the week or maybe on Sunday so that that child kind of has an idea of what's expected during the week if there's going to be any changes. Discussing with the teacher any sort of predicted days where teachers might be in the classroom. So for parents and individuals on the spectrum, this is a big one. Substitute teachers, and I hear this all the time from our parents. Parents fear substitute teachers. They fear those days where those teachers are off because for so many of these kiddos, that can just be enough. Just seeing a different face there at the front of the classroom can be enough to just set off a whirlwind of changes for that child that day. And so just having that dialogue with the teacher and saying, hey, FYI, my kiddo just doesn't do well with substitute teachers. So maybe we can discuss if you have a plan ahead of time, you can let me know and I can start transitioning him into those situations. And obviously knowing that that's just going to happen. Teachers get sick. There's certain aspects of those situations you can't predict. And so what is it? What's the plan? We've had kids where the school has excused them from school that day because they become so impaired or because they can be such a risk to themselves or others in the classroom that has been kind of an understanding. So there's just different things that can be done, but that dialogue with the teacher is the first place to start. And then request team meetings if needed to make adjustments and accommodations as well when a kiddo has an IEP. All right, real quick, just when it comes to school breaks, reviewing calendar. So, you know, we have kids that go back to school, but then you have a week-long break in October for fall break, or you have 2 weeks for Christmas, or you have spring break. So anytime you have that, review the countdown or the calendar and count down until you return to school. That can help in that transition. Try and maintain a consistent schedule despite that, but those are short periods of time. It's not like summertime where you have months. So if you can try to maintain a consistent school schedule during that time, that transition will make it a little bit easier at the end. Use visuals for both home and school. So what the school is using, try to use that at home as well during that period of time so it's not that much of a shift. Use social stories, schedule social outings during those times to continue learning, continue socially engaging, and then accessing autism camps. Like in the summertime, there's some wonderful community resources. Like the Autism Support and Resource Center in Genesee County is a phenomenal resource, and they do summer camps for kids on the spectrum. And so trying to find what's available in your community during those break times can be really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your expertise with return to school, specifically with kiddos on the spectrum. That was really, really helpful. It seems like there's a lot of similarities between what you and Dr. Sedurna covered, but then also some extra special tools in our kit for kiddos on the spectrum. We have a little bit of time left to any like words of advice or last kind of minute recommendations if anyone else has anything to add. I'm going to pop in the chat. We don't really have the time to go a deep dive in terms of thinking about the what I think is the elephant in the room, talking about immunizations and how there's no evidence to prove, if you will, that there's any correlation, causation between autism and immunizations, meaning there's a lot of research out there that proves that immunizations do not cause autism. So I'll pop a website in the chat for everyone. But any last kind of words for any of you before we move on to the students?
Oh, yes. I just want to add early recognition of autism. I have a cousin, Rocco, and he was about 2 years old when we noticed that he was parroting, like whenever you speak something, he would repeat it. And so his parents noticed that after he had their second child, that it wasn't part of the normal development, and was able to get him into like ABA therapy. And he's in ninth grade, and he's, doing well. But all those things that you mentioned, creating that boundary, the schedule, routine, is all excellent.
Early recognition is super important in terms of getting them into important therapies like ABA. Anyone else? Any last comments? All right. Thank you again so much, Dr. Burrell and Dr. Sidrona. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say great presentation and information. I just wanted to give highlight too. There's a fashion show that takes place yearly that's titled This Is Me. And it's all children that have autism. It's amazing to see, especially with the crowd. And a couple of years ago, Hurley did a video with the parents coming in, having them express how they feel when they will come into the ERs, or how they would like the community to respond to them. So thank you for highlighting and bringing this education.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Suin and Elise. They are third-year medical students. They're going to touch on a relatively adjacent topic where they're going to talk about screen time and development. I think we're going to probably have to go through it a little quicker, but I'm going to hand it over to you guys.
All right. Hello, everyone. Are we sharing the screen? I'm assuming probably.
I don't see anything on the screen.
Okay. Let me figure that out. Sorry, one second.
Okay, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. We are Sue and Elise. So we're just going to present on screen time, parental tech use, and child development in more detail. Let's see if it works. Okay, so we're going to probably skip the poll questions and discussion questions we have due to time, but we'll get into the content. Sue, if you want to start off.
Yeah, so this first study that we'll talk about had around 7,000 mothers and their child in Japan, and they measured screen time at age 1 and tracked their development at ages 2 and 4, screen time being TV, tablets, phone, and video games. And their findings were as expected. Children exposed to greater than 4 hours a day of screen time at age 1 had higher risk of developmental delays, including at age 2, communication, fine motor skills, problem solving, and personal and social skills. And they found that after age 2, at age 4, these communication and problem solving delays persisted.
I think we could go ahead and ask. Oh, my bad. I think I paused my screen share. Where did it go? Sorry.
We can, if you want, if you're cool with it, we can, if you want to go over the rest, or do you want to just kind of pause for discussion here?
We can pause for your discussion here.
Okay. Can we bring in like multiple people for this, please?
Of course, yeah. Are there any tips that the panelists have for the family struggling to reduce screen time?
I saw Dr. Sidrona, you unmuted.
Yes, it's challenging because I think especially after COVID, screens have become one of the most safest forms of supervision or structure when a parent needs to multitask. And so I don't want to take away the reality that sometimes that's the best we can do is a screen. And yet what I would say is less is more. And if we're at the point where that's happening in place of in-person communication, in place of in-person play, we have to think about how to lessen it. With younger kids, setting limits is tricky because they do go up in arms over it and temper tantrum. Like they get mad, they show it. That's their age. They don't regulate their emotions before 5. But given this research study, which is talking about littles, especially in that little age, it's okay to say later or no. And then I would put it completely out of sight to the extent that's possible. If you can't see the phone and you're occupied doing something else, you're less likely to keep persisting on asking for it. So that would be like my little pearl around that.
We actually do that in my home. We hide the remote, or like we put it up on the countertop. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. And so when it's done, it's done. It's out of sight, out of mind, and like it's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more, just to give some more perspective, there's a lot more literature coming out in terms of screen time and development. So this is just one study. They looked at a lot of different kids. I think you said 7,000. And so while it is just one study, we don't usually get too excited necessarily, but the amount of kids it looked at, the fact that there's more studies coming out showing that screen time is in fact, there are some associations with developmental delay. Can someone on the panelists talk about how all screen time is not the same? I'm sure there's someone out there who can touch on that. What does that mean when people say not all screen time is the same? For example, my first child didn't get any screen time in his first year of life per the American Academy of Pediatric guidelines. My second child, my daughter, ended up getting screen time from the time she was born. And so anyone want to comment on that?
There's definitely a lot of quality differences between certain programs, right? So you may have something like just more educational programs, kind of learning programs that they can access through like a YouTube, or they can watch videos of something that's very repetitive or someone playing a video game, right? So there's different things that can be accessed using these different kinds of media. And so certainly when you feel like the child is able to access tablet time, things like that, we always encourage parents to kind of try to stay on the edge of more educational programming. Things like Miss Rachel and things that are
Miss Rachel.
just, yeah, I love Miss Rachel. She's fabulous. But those types of programmings are a little bit more, have more substance to them than a lot of those other programs. And so that's a common discussion that we have with our families.
What about some of those ones that maybe aren't like PBS or Miss Rachel, but you're talking to your kid during it, or you're saying, oh, what are they doing? Or what do you see? Do you think that's kind of a bridge if, say, I don't know, say you have a 10-year-old who's going to watch what he's going to watch, but then you have that 2-year-old who's watching the same thing?
Absolutely.
Dr. Nurse T, any comments on screen time and young kids?
Let me see. I do have like my small grandchildren. My oldest granddaughter who is 12, and so she would spend a lot of time with me. So at the time, I gave her the tablet or the phone. So now at 12, it's kind of hard, kind of distract her. She'll be out and she'll be on the phone. So just kind of reiterating, like, okay, it's time. You're in person. You're in an event, and go out and play, because a lot of times the screen takes place of activities like running outside or getting sunshine. So just having that balance, like you say, hiding it, distracting, or changing different. Okay, if you don't have the screen time, let's read a book. What's your find at age appropriate. Reading books and different
Absolutely.
things away from taking it back old school. When we didn't have the tablets and the phones, but that's what I do.
And then reinforcing brain development and positive parenting. I have a 3-year-old, and I know sometimes, my daughter or even I would give my granddaughter her tablet just to occupy her time. But like Dr. G said, finding other things to occupy her time, because I notice she'll build relationships with the people on the tablet. And then she'll create those imaginary friends. So I try to limit her screen time so her relationships that she's building will be real with real people. Because sometimes I'll hear her say stuff and I'm like, where did you get that from? And it's because she's been on her tablet. So I do think it's important for parents to try to spend as much time as they can with their children and help with that brain development. So
in the past,
Absolutely.
I've often recommended to our families that if they're not the tech savvy families, which a lot of our parents, and I am not one of those people, if you're not tech savvy, there are free online courses that you can take that are very brief, that you can identify how to lock iPads and how to set up screen time permissions. And so like for my 2 kiddos, 7 and 9, they cannot have any more than 2 hours of tablet time like on each weekday or weekend. And so
Yeah.
and then
Parental controls are everything.
it's wonderful. And then the thing that it does is it takes out the parent as the cause, as the
Yeah.
person in charge, right? So it's the tablet, it's the way it's set up. So it actually eliminates a lot of tantrums and things like that.
Fighting. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
YouTube has that too. YouTube, you can set like
Yeah.
the timer to amount how much and you have the password to put in on kids YouTube,
A
not
wonderful
Yeah.
tool.
So looking out
Yes.
parental controls. Well, thank you so much. Sue-Ann and Elise popped in the chat the rest of their presentation. They looked at a few other studies. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to take a peek. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. We really appreciate all of our guests. And then I think that there's going to be a few slides on some updates that we have. Specifically, I am supposed to mention that, sorry, I'm looking at my notes.